The starship Horizon glided through the inky blackness of uncharted space, its sleek hull reflecting pinpricks of distant starlight. Lieutenant Sarah Nakamura sat at her monitoring station, her fingers hovering over holographic displays that shimmered with a soft blue glow. The ship's observation deck remained quiet, save for the gentle hum of advanced systems and the occasional soft beep of navigation computers. Sarah had drawn the midnight shift, a rotation that typically meant hours of monotonous scanning and minimal activity. Most deep space exploration missions were characterized by long stretches of uneventful monitoring. Humanity's expansion into the galactic frontier was a patient endeavor, methodical and measured. Her dark eyes flickered across the sensor readings, tracking minute variations in background radiation and quantum flux. The ship's advanced sensors could detect the most minute changes in the surrounding space, a testament to human engineering and scientific innovation. Horizon represented the pinnacle of human space exploration technology, a vessel designed not just for observation, but for adaptation and survival. Without warning, a massive energy signature erupted across her displays. The holographic screens burst into a kaleidoscope of warning colors, deep crimsons and urgent oranges that immediately signaled something extraordinary was happening. Sarah's training kicked in instantly. Her fingers moved with practiced precision, isolating and analyzing the unexpected data burst. "Commander Rodriguez," she called out, her voice steady despite the adrenaline beginning to surge through her system. "We have an anomalous energy reading at coordinates 247 Mark 33. The ship's commander appeared within moments, her veteran's intuition already sensing something significant. Commander Elena Rodriguez was a study in controlled intensity, a veteran of multiple deep space missions with a reputation for calm decision-making under pressure. "Details," Lieutenant Rodriguez commanded, her eyes already scanning the holographic displays. Sarah manipulated the sensors, expanding the data visualization. "Unknown vessel configuration. Energy signatures unlike anything in our database. Scale suggests a capital-class warship, potentially multiple vessels. They appear to be engaged in some form of military operation." The holographic display expanded, revealing a scene of extraordinary scale. Multiple massive vessels hung in space, their designs angular and biomechanical, clearly not of human origin. Exotic energy weapons discharged between the ships, creating spectacular displays of destructive potential that dwarfed human technological capabilities. Rodriguez leaned closer, her analytical mind processing the information rapidly. "They're not just ships. This looks like a systematic suppression operation, likely an invasion or subjugation effort. The alien vessels were systematically surrounding and neutralizing smaller craft. Each of the larger ships moved with a coordinated precision that suggested a highly advanced, potentially hive-minded civilization. Their weapons operated with a cold, calculated efficiency that spoke of generations of refined military technology. We're detecting multiple smaller vessels being systematically disabled, Sarah reported. Her hands moved across the sensors, attempting to gather as much data as possible. The technological disparity is significant. Commander Rodriguez understood immediately. These were not explorers. This was a military operation of overwhelming force, designed to crush any potential resistance with absolute certainty. "They haven't detected us," Rodriguez muttered, more to herself than to Sarah. "Our stealth systems are holding." Human engineers had developed advanced quantum camouflage technologies that could render their ship virtually invisible to most scanning technologies. But something changed in that moment. One of the massive alien vessels, easily 10 times the size of the Horizon, suddenly pivoted. Its sensor arrays swept across their location with a precision that felt almost predatory. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "Commander, I think." A massive energy pulse erupted from the alien vessel. The Horizon's quantum camouflage systems instantly went into emergency mode, transforming the ship's exterior into a complex adaptive matrix designed to dissipate and redirect incoming energy signatures. "Evasive maneuvers," Rodriguez shouted, her voice cutting through the sudden tension on the bridge. The next few moments would determine whether this routine exploration mission would become humanity's first direct encounter with a potentially hostile galactic civilization. Everything they had trained for, everything they had developed in their careful, methodical expansion into space, would be tested in an instant. The horizon was about to make first contact, whether it wanted to or not. The United Earth Diplomatic Center buzzed with nervous energy. Holographic displays lined the circular chamber, each screen showing different alien representatives from across the known galaxy. Dr. Marcus Chen stood at the center, his presentation meticulously prepared, every data point carefully validated. He activated the primary display, showing the recorded sensor logs from the Horizon's encounter. The images were stunning. Massive alien vessels engaged in what could only be described as a systematic elimination of smaller spacecraft. The technological sophistication was beyond anything humanity had previously encountered. Distinguished members of the Galactic Confederation, Chen began, his voice calm and precise, we have documented evidence of a significant threat to galactic stability. A ripple of dismissive murmurs spread through the holographic chamber. The Zorn representative, a crystalline being that shifted colors with each emotional state, turned a deep shade of mocking purple. Its translator device crackled with barely concealed condescension. Humans, the Zorn diplomat intoned, your species has been spacefaring for less than 2 centuries. The idea that you would lecture the Galactic Confederation about interstellar threats is, the translator paused, searching for the appropriate diplomatic terminology. Adorably misguided. Seated to Chen's left, Ambassador Elena Rodriguez maintained her composure. She had spent years studying galactic diplomacy, understanding the complex social dynamics of interspecies communication. This moment was precisely why she had been selected for this critical mission. The Confederation's ruling council was a diverse assembly of the galaxy's most established spacefaring civilizations. The Kurloks, with their tentacled forms and intricate biomechanical exoskeletons, dominated the central platform. The Vreen representatives floated in their anti-gravity chambers, their translucent bodies shimmering with bioluminescent patterns of skepticism. Chen advanced to the next slide. These are not mere conjecture or hypothetical scenarios. We have direct sensor logs showing a systematic military operation that suggests a level of technological and strategic capability that poses an immediate threat to multiple developing civilizations. A holographic representation of the alien vessels rotated slowly, revealing their complex biomechanical design. Each ship seemed to be a living ecosystem, with energy signatures that defied current understanding of propulsion and weapon systems. The Kurlok's primary diplomat, a massive being with multiple sensory stalks, leaned forward. Your evidence is circumstantial at best, Dr. Chen. The Galactic Confederation has maintained peaceful relations with all known spacefaring civilizations for over 3,000 standard cycles. Rodriguez stepped forward, her military background evident in her precise movements. Peaceful relations are maintained through vigilance, not complacency, she interjected. Our initial reconnaissance suggests these vessels represent a civilization entirely unknown to current galactic mapping. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of translated languages. Some representatives looked intrigued, others appeared deeply annoyed. The Vreen delegation began a complex series of color shifts that suggested a mixture of curiosity and diplomatic irritation. We will form a subcommittee, the Kurlok's diplomat announced, to review these claims. A preliminary investigation will be conducted over the next 12 standard cycles. 12 cycles, approximately 3 Earth years, would be far too late if the threat was real. As the meeting concluded, Chen turned to Rodriguez. They're not taking this seriously, he muttered, the frustration evident in his voice. Then we prepare independently, Rodriguez responded, her tone resolute. If the Confederation won't act, humanity will. Back at the United Earth Strategic Command, a different conversation was taking place. Military strategists, Xenobiologists and computer scientists began assembling what would become humanity's first line of defense against an unknown threat. Dr. Camara Williams, head of Xenotechnology Research, spread multiple holographic displays across the conference room. If these sensor logs are accurate, we're looking at a civilization with technological capabilities far beyond our current understanding. Her team began breaking down the sensor data, searching for any potential weakness, any hint of vulnerability in the alien vessel designs. "We may be outgunned," Williams continued, "but we are not outthought." The room filled with the quiet determination that had defined human exploration throughout history. They were preparing for a conflict that no one else believed was coming. They were getting ready to defend not just Earth, but potentially every civilization that might fall victim to this unknown threat. Humanity was going to war, whether the rest of the galaxy was ready or not. The Global Defense Research Complex rose from the Australian outback like a monument to human potential. Its gleaming white exterior belied the intense activity happening within, a hive of creativity that would redefine humanity's approach to interstellar conflict. Dr. Zara Patel stood before a massive holographic display, her fingers dancing across multiple data streams. Around her, the most brilliant minds from every discipline imaginable worked in a symphony of collaborative innovation. Psychologists sat beside quantum physicists. Linguists worked with neural network engineers. Biologists collaborated with computer scientists. "We can't approach this like a traditional military problem," Zara announced to the assembled team. Her voice carried the quiet certainty of someone who had spent years studying complex adaptive systems. The room was a testament to human diversity. Researchers from every continent, every background, brought their unique perspectives to bear on an unprecedented challenge. Traditional military thinking had always been about superior firepower, about overwhelming force. But the sensor logs from the horizon suggested they were facing a civilization with technological capabilities far beyond simple destruction. Major David Rodriguez, no relation to the Starship commander, stepped forward. A veteran of multiple special operations, he represented the military's evolving understanding of conflict. "We're not just preparing for a war," he said. "We're developing a comprehensive response system." The holographic display shifted, showing multiple layers of potential strategy. Each layer represented a different approach: psychological warfare, adaptive communication protocols, technological counterintelligence. Dr. Elena Kojima, a leading expert in xenopsychology, began explaining their core approach. These alien civilizations likely have rigid hierarchical structures. Their military efficiency suggests a top-down command system with limited individual adaptability. She pulled up comparative analysis charts. Alien military communications showed predictable patterns, information flowing in strict, measurable channels. Human communication, by contrast, was messy, adaptive, filled with nuance and unexpected connections. "Our strength is our unpredictability," Kojima continued. "Where they see a problem as a linear challenge, we see a multi-dimensional puzzle." Training facilities were transformed into living laboratories of human potential. Soldiers learned far more than traditional combat skills. They studied complex adaptive thinking, practiced rapid scenario generation, and developed skills that blended psychological insight with technological innovation. Dr. Michael Chen, a neural interface specialist, demonstrated a revolutionary training system. Recruits wore advanced neural networks that simulated thousands of potential conflict scenarios. Unlike traditional military simulations, these programs deliberately introduced unexpected variables, teaching adaptability over rote response. "We're not training soldiers," Chen explained. "We're developing cognitive flexibility." The research complex became a crucible of innovation. Advanced quantum computing systems ran continuous simulations, exploring potential alien communication protocols. Linguistic teams developed adaptive translation matrices that could theoretically decode communication systems in real time. Zara Patel's team focused on what they called cognitive camouflage, methods of communication and technological interaction that could potentially render human systems unreadable to an alien intelligence. Imagine, she told her team, a communication system so contextually complex that it appears as background noise to a hierarchical intelligence. Prototype technologies emerged that defied traditional understanding. Adaptive armor that could rapidly reconfigure its molecular structure. Communication systems that could instantaneously generate multiple layers of meaning. Tactical interfaces that prioritized creative problem-solving over predetermined responses. The military leadership watched these developments with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. This wasn't just military preparation, it was a fundamental reimagining of human potential. Major Rodriguez reviewed the latest training assessments. Recruits were no longer just learning to follow orders. They were learning to think independently, to see challenges as complex ecosystems of possibility. "We're preparing for a conflict," he muttered to himself, "but we're really developing a new way of understanding interaction." As the sun set over the research complex, holographic displays continued to flicker. Thousands of minds worked in concert, driven by a shared understanding. Humanity's survival would depend not on superior firepower, but on its ability to adapt, to think creatively, to see beyond the obvious. The innovation crucible was heating up, and humanity was about to show the galaxy something entirely unexpected. The colonized moon of New Singapore hung like a jewel against the darkness of space. Massive atmospheric domes created a patchwork of gleaming silver and deep blue, protecting the human settlement that represented humanity's most advanced extraterrestrial colony. Alarms shattered the early morning calm. Defense systems transitioned from standby to full alert with a precision that spoke of months of intensive preparation. Captain Laura Chen stood on a primary defense platform, her eyes fixed on the incoming sensor readings. "Incoming vessels," the AI system reported. "Configuration matches preliminary alien threat models." The Tralaxian fleet emerged from subspace with terrifying precision. Massive ships that seemed to be living machines more than traditional spacecraft, their biomechanical structures pulsing with energy that defied conventional understanding. They had come to eliminate the human colony, a statement of total conquest. What the aliens didn't know was that New Singapore was no ordinary colony. Every centimeter of its defensive infrastructure had been designed as a living, adaptive system. The colony was less a settlement and more a complex organism of human innovation. "Activate adaptive camouflage," Captain Chen commanded. The colony's surface began to transform. Holographic projections mixed with advanced metamaterial surfaces created an impossible landscape. Buildings shifted and blended, creating false terrain that would confuse even the most advanced scanning systems. Underground networks of quantum-encrypted communication lines began to pulse with carefully designed interference patterns. The first wave of alien attack craft approached. Energy weapons that could vaporize conventional defenses prepared to strike. Nothing happened as they expected. Decoy systems activated. Holographic projections of civilian structures appeared and disappeared. Energy signatures fluctuated wildly, creating a landscape of pure confusion. The alien vessels found themselves firing at targets that weren't real, their advanced targeting systems utterly bewildered. Dr. Marcus Rodriguez, the colony's chief defense strategist, watched the initial engagement with calculated calm. "They're approaching this like a standard suppression operation," he muttered to his team. Classic hierarchical military thinking. Underground defense networks began their own symphony of disruption. Quantum-encrypted communication lines created multiple layers of false information. Each alien scanning pulse was met with a response that was simultaneously everywhere and nowhere. The colony's defensive systems were not about direct confrontation. They were about creating a cognitive battlefield that the aliens could not comprehend. Specialized drone swarms emerged from hidden launch sites. These were not traditional combat drones, but adaptive systems that could change configuration mid-flight. They moved with a fluidity that suggested more than programmed responses. They seemed to think, to adapt in real time. "We're not just defending," Captain Chen explained to her team. "We're teaching them a lesson about complexity." The alien fleet found itself fighting a colony that seemed to have no fixed structure. Buildings appeared and disappeared. Defense systems materialized from seemingly empty terrain. Communication networks created a fog of electronic warfare that overwhelmed their most advanced scanning technologies. Hours passed. The alien fleet, designed for overwhelming direct confrontation, found itself utterly neutralized. Not a single human life was lost. Not a single human structure was damaged. Dr. Rodriguez reviewed the initial engagement data. They approached this like a mathematical problem, he explained. We responded like a living ecosystem. The Battle of New Singapore would become a legendary moment in human military history. It wasn't a victory of superior firepower, but of adaptive thinking. The colony had transformed warfare from a contest of destruction to a complex communication challenge. As the alien fleet retreated, confused and defeated, the humans of New Singapore celebrated not with triumphalism, but with a quiet understanding. They had just demonstrated something profound about human potential. They had shown that adaptability, creativity, and collaborative thinking were the most powerful weapons in the universe. The first major confrontation was over, and humanity had just changed the rules of engagement forever. The Galactic Confederation's central chamber hummed with an unusual energy. News of the New Singapore engagement had spread faster than any official communication, transmitted through the complex web of interstellar information networks. Holographic displays flickered with recorded footage of the unprecedented defensive action. Dr. Marcus Chen stood before the assembled representatives, his presentation a masterpiece of diplomatic subtlety and scientific precision. Gone was the desperate plea of their previous encounter. Now he carried the confidence of someone who had just fundamentally changed the understanding of galactic conflict. What you witnessed, Chen began, his voice calm and measured, was not a defensive action. It was a demonstration of adaptive strategic thinking. The Korolok's primary diplomat, a massive being whose multiple sensory stalks quivered with interest, leaned forward. The crystalline Zorn representative shifted through a spectrum of colors that suggested a complex mixture of confusion and grudging respect. Chen's presentation unpacked the New Singapore engagement with surgical precision. Each slide revealed layers of strategic complexity that challenged everything the Galactic Confederation understood about warfare and technological adaptation. Dr. Elena Kojima, the xenopsychology expert, stepped forward to explain the deeper implications. Our defensive strategy wasn't about defeating the enemy, she explained. It was about communicating in a language of complexity that challenges fundamental assumptions about conflict. The assembled representatives watched as holographic reconstructions showed how human defensive systems had transformed the battlefield into a cognitive challenge. Alien attack formations had been neutralized not through superior firepower, but through an approach that made traditional military thinking obsolete. Representative Christak of the Vreen delegation, a being of pure energy contained within an intricate environmental suit, spoke first. Explain the communication protocols, he demanded. The translator conveyed a tone of genuine scientific curiosity. Chen smiled. This was the moment they had been waiting for. The presentation delved into the adaptive communication systems developed by human researchers. These were not simple translation matrices or communication protocols. They were living, evolving systems that could generate multiple layers of meaning simultaneously. Imagine a language, Chen explained, that is simultaneously a defensive system, a communication network, and a problem-solving algorithm. The chamber fell silent. Diplomatic missions began to arrive at human colonies. Representatives from civilizations that had long suffered under the threat of more technologically advanced species saw something unprecedented. Humanity wasn't just defending itself, it was reimagining the very concept of defense. Dr. Rodriguez, who had been instrumental in developing the New Singapore defensive strategy, met with various alien delegations. Each meeting was less a traditional diplomatic encounter and more an exchange of fundamental understanding. We're not interested in conquest, Rodriguez would explain. We're interested in solving complex challenges. The Galactic Confederation found itself facing a fundamental paradigm shift. Humanity had demonstrated something revolutionary: that technological superiority was less important than adaptive thinking. That complexity could be a weapon more powerful than any energy cannon. Scientific delegations began requesting collaborative research opportunities. The adaptive technologies developed for the new Singapore defense were of intense interest to civilizations that had long felt helpless against more technologically advanced threats. Dr. Camara Williams, head of xenotechnology research, found herself at the center of a storm of scientific collaboration. Research proposals flooded in from across the galaxy. Species that had previously viewed humans as insignificant now saw them as potential partners in reimagining technological and strategic thinking. The Battle of New Singapore had done more than defend a colony. It had fundamentally altered the galactic understanding of potential. As the diplomatic meetings concluded, the Kuralok's primary diplomat made a statement that would be remembered throughout galactic history. Humanity has shown us that the most powerful technology is not a weapon, but a way of thinking. The galaxy was changing, and humanity was at the center of that transformation. The United Earth Strategic Command Center pulsed with a carefully controlled intensity. Holographic displays covered every wall, each screen showing a different layer of the emerging strategy. This was not going to be a traditional military campaign. It would be a multidimensional challenge that redefined the concept of interstellar conflict. Commander Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of the operations room, her fingers tracing complex patterns across adaptive communication interfaces. Around her, teams of specialists from disciplines that had never before collaborated worked in perfect synchronization. "Our objective," she announced to the assembled team, "is not conquest. It's systematic disruption." The plan was elegantly complex. Instead of targeting physical infrastructure, humanity would attack the very communication and control systems of the alien civilization. Specialized teams had spent months studying the hierarchical communication patterns intercepted from the initial encounters. Dr. Marcus Chen, now leading the Xenocommunication Research Division, explained the core strategy. "We're going to introduce complexity into their most fundamental systems, not through destruction, but through cognitive interference." Quantum encrypted communication drones began their deployment. These were not traditional surveillance or combat vehicles. They were adaptive systems designed to infiltrate and subtly manipulate communication networks. Each drone could generate millions of communication variations, creating a fog of informational uncertainty. Linguistic specialists worked alongside quantum engineers and psychological warfare experts. They developed communication protocols that would appear completely nonsensical to a hierarchical communication system, but contained layers of deeply complex information. "Think of it like a language virus," Dr. Zora Puddle explained. "We're not destroying their systems. We're making them fundamentally unreadable." The first wave of the counteroffensive looked nothing like a traditional military action. Specialized teams began introducing subtle variations into intercepted communication channels. Mathematical anomalies appeared in standard transmission protocols. Communication patterns became slightly, almost imperceptibly, more complex. Major David Rodriguez oversaw the infiltration teams. "We're not fighting a war," he told his specialists. "We're solving the most complex puzzle in galactic history." Specialized drone swarms began their mission. They moved with an organic complexity that defied traditional understanding of mechanical movement. Each drone was less a piece of equipment and more a node in a living, adaptive network. The alien communication systems began to show the first signs of strain. Hierarchical command structures that had operated with machine-like precision for generations suddenly found themselves dealing with information they could not categorize or understand. Dr. Elena Kojima's psychological warfare team had prepared for this moment. They had studied the alien communication patterns with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Every transmission was a potential weapon. Every communication channel a battlefield of cognitive complexity. "We're teaching them a new language of interaction," Kojima explained. "One where rigid hierarchy becomes a vulnerability." Deep within alien communication networks, Human-introduced complexity began to spread. Command structures found themselves dealing with information that defied their most basic understanding. Each attempt to analyze the new communication patterns created more confusion. The counteroffensive was not about destruction. It was about transformation. Specialized teams monitored the developing situation. They weren't looking for traditional markers of military success. They were watching how the alien civilization's communication systems responded to unprecedented complexity. Commander Rodriguez reviewed the initial reports. "We're not just disrupting their systems," she noted. "We're demonstrating an entirely new approach to interaction." Days turned into weeks. The alien civilization found its most fundamental communication systems becoming increasingly unstable, not through direct attack, but through the introduction of cognitive complexity that their hierarchical systems could not comprehend. Humanity was fighting a war unlike any in galactic history, a war won not through firepower, but through the most powerful weapon imaginable, the ability to think beyond established boundaries. The counteroffensive had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. The space near the Trilaxian home system crackled with an energy that defied conventional understanding. Hundreds of vessels from multiple civilizations moved in a complex dance, a fleet assembled through humanity's unprecedented diplomatic efforts. Captain Elena Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the horizon, her hands hovering over adaptive command interfaces. Around her, a coalition of liberated species prepared for the most significant confrontation in galactic history. Preliminary analysis complete, the ship's advanced AI reported. Enemy fleet composition exceeds initial projections by 237%. The Trilaxian home system was a fortress of technological might. Massive energy networks surrounded their primary planets, defensive systems that had crushed countless civilizations over millennia. Traditional military strategy would have called this an impossible assault. But this was not a traditional assault. Dr. Marcus Chen's communication teams had spent months preparing a multi-layered infiltration strategy. The alien defensive systems were about to face something they could not comprehend, a truly adaptive intelligence. "Initiate Phase 1, Rodriguez commanded. The first wave of the assault looked nothing like a military engagement. Specialized quantum communication drones began their complex dance. Each drone was a node in a living, adaptive network that could generate millions of communication variations per second. The Trilaxian defensive systems began to encounter something unprecedented, information streams that were simultaneously meaningless and profoundly complex. Communication protocols that existed in multiple states simultaneously. Defensive algorithms found themselves confronted with problems that had no linear solution. Dr. Zara Patel's team had prepared for this moment. They had studied the alien communication systems with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Every transmission was a potential weapon, every communication channel a battlefield of cognitive complexity. "We're not breaking their systems," Patel explained to her team. "We're fundamentally reimagining how information can exist." Specialized infiltration teams moved with a fluidity that defied traditional understanding of military movement. These were not soldiers in the traditional sense. They were adaptive problem solvers, each capable of making complex decisions in microseconds. The Trilaxian defensive systems began to show the first signs of strain. Hierarchical command structures that had operated with machine-like precision for generations suddenly found themselves dealing with information they could not categorize or understand. Incoming defensive response, the Horizon's AI reported. Probability of successful defense, approaching 0. But this was not about traditional military success. This was a demonstration of a fundamentally different approach to interaction, to problem solving, to existence itself. Specialized drone swarms began their most complex maneuver. They moved with an organic complexity that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Each drone was less a piece of equipment and more a node in a living, adaptive network. The Trilaxian fleet found itself fighting an enemy that was everywhere and nowhere. Defensive systems designed to counter direct attacks found themselves dealing with an assault that had no single point of origin. Commander Rodriguez watched the engagement with a calm that surprised even herself. "We're not destroying," she muttered. "We're transforming." Hours passed. The Trilaxian defensive systems began to collapse not through direct destruction, but through the introduction of unprecedented complexity. Their most fundamental communication and defensive protocols became increasingly unstable. Dr. Elena Kojima's psychological warfare team had prepared for this moment. They had studied the alien communication patterns with scientific precision. Every transmission was a potential weapon. Every communication channel a battlefield of cognitive complexity. "We're teaching them a new language of interaction," Kojima had explained during their preparation. "One where rigid hierarchy becomes a fundamental weakness." As the final moments of the confrontation approached, something extraordinary happened. The Trilaxian defensive systems began to show signs of fundamental transformation. Not destruction. Transformation. The Coalition fleet watched in collective amazement. Humanity had done something unprecedented. They had won a conflict not through superior firepower, but through a complete reimagining of what conflict could mean. The final confrontation was over, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Galactic Reconstruction Summit gathered representatives from over 200 civilizations in a massive orbital complex. Holographic displays shimmered with the collective hopes of species that had known nothing but conflict for generations. Dr. Marcus Chen stood at the center of the assembly, no longer the desperate diplomat from years past. Now he represented something far more significant, a fundamental shift in galactic civilization. "We are not here to establish dominance," Chen began, his voice carrying across multiple translation networks. "We are here to redefine cooperation." The summit hall reflected the diversity of galactic life. Crystalline beings from the Zorn homeworld sat beside energy-based life forms from the Vreen territories. Tentacled representatives from the Korlox delegation shared communication interfaces with silicon-based intelligences. Dr. Elena Kojima explained the core principle of the new galactic framework. "Our previous understanding of interaction was based on hierarchical models of power and control. We're proposing a network-based approach of collaborative problem-solving." The new governance model was revolutionary. Instead of a top-down confederation, they were creating a dynamic, adaptive system of interstellar cooperation. Each civilization would contribute its unique perspective, with communication protocols designed to value complexity over conformity. Commander Elena Rodriguez presented the strategic insights gained from the conflict. "Our victory was not about military superiority," she explained. "It was about demonstrating the power of adaptive thinking." Specialized research centers were established across multiple star systems. These were not traditional diplomatic or military installations, but living laboratories of collaborative innovation. Species that had been enemies for millennia now found themselves working together on unprecedented challenges. Dr. Zora Patil unveiled the first interspecies innovation network. "We're creating a communication system that doesn't just translate languages," she explained. "We're developing a framework that can translate entire cultural perspectives." The technological advances were staggering. Communication systems that could bridge not just linguistic differences, but fundamental differences in perception and cognition. Adaptive problem-solving networks that could approach challenges from multiple evolutionary perspectives simultaneously. Representatives from previously oppressed civilizations found themselves at the forefront of this new galactic order. The Trilaxian subject species, long denied their own cultural development, began to explore their potential in ways they had never imagined. "We are not seeking to replace old systems," Chen emphasized. "We are seeking to create a framework of continuous adaptation." The summit developed a new charter of galactic interaction. Its core principles were revolutionary. Complexity is a value, not a threat. Diversity of perspective is the primary source of problem-solving. No single civilization has a monopoly on understanding. Continuous adaptation is the primary survival strategy. Scientific collaborations emerged that would have been unimaginable years before. Civilizations that had been isolated for millennia began sharing knowledge, technologies, and cultural perspectives. Dr. Kojima's team developed communication matrices that could translate not just words, but entire conceptual frameworks, a breakthrough that would reshape understanding across species. Commander Rodriguez reflected on the journey. What had begun as a defensive action had transformed into a fundamental reimagining of galactic civilization. The final document of the summit was not a traditional treaty, but a living, adapted framework. It could update itself, learn, and transform based on new information and perspectives. As the summit concluded, something profound had occurred. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy. They had shown the galaxy a new way of existing. Dr. Chen made a final statement that would be remembered for generations. Our greatest strength is not our technology. It is our ability to see complexity as an opportunity, not a threat. The orbital complex hummed with a sense of possibility. Civilizations that had known only conflict now saw a path to something entirely new. The galaxy was changing. And for the first time in millennia, that change was filled with hope.